Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy.
Okay, so welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism with Mick Mulroy and Adam Piercy. That's me and Mick. Thank you for being here again, Mick. This week, we were going to jump right into a topic that happens a lot with Mick and I because, and I'll say, I'm not like famous or anything. I'm not famous, but I do tend to get recognized a little bit when I go to Stoic events or when I, attend something like Stoicon. And Stoicon 2025 is going to be held on October 18th this year. And I think, Mick, you've been asked to speak. But when Mick and I go to events, we get a lot of times where people come up to you and asks you questions, and it highlights some key misconceptions about the practice, which we kind of talked about in some of the other episodes, but I thought it'd be good to do a strong episode today on just that topic, because I think everybody goes through that, right? Christianity goes through that, and Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism, every philosophy or religion or practice of any kind tends to go through a misconception or two as it goes along through its life cycle. So Mick, but I would love to hear from you first, Mick, because you also have done some traveling. I think were you in Athens for Stoicon a couple of years ago?
I was for Stoicon, and I also was there for a Aurelius Foundation event.
That's right. That was at the Plato's Academy Center, right? Type of thing.
Yes,
Okay.
it was awesome. I did my spiel, if you will, my talk. We were on a large boat looking up at Poseidon's temple.
Okay.
So they were pretty much distracted from me because it was like surreal looking. It was almost AI
Wow.
kind of generated image behind me. You're all on the deck, right? So Poseidonis, as the Greeks call him, was the temple at least was right behind me.
Yeah. Okay.
Gorgeous, wonderful event, really well attended.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Save me. Fascinating speakers to include former Wimbledon champions, former Olympic gold medalists, actors, directors, business, very successful business people. It was fascinating.
So even in what's interesting, and thank you for sharing that story. What's interesting though, I find, is even when you go to a Stoicon or like a big Stoic event like that, you get to a spot where you have you still have a lot of misconceptions that go around about it. At least misconceptions at the core part of the philosophy. So why don't we kick off with yourself? I'll prompt you to open us up today. Then, what's something that you get, and it can be maybe you've gotten it once, maybe you get it every time. But what's something that you've come across as a misconception in your travels and in your speaking about this with people out in the public?
So, and I've mentioned this before. I don't know that I would have, I guess I did kind of call myself a Stoic as a kid. And that was a time when nobody knew what I was talking about. I mean, literally, like, is that kind of like a branch of, Methodist church or something, But I grew up all over the country, but part of it was my dad was a professor, but when we lived in Georgia, we lived in a really rural place. He obviously commuted to the university, but so I've seen it when nobody knew what I was talking about to now when it's super popular. And I think once something becomes super popular, you also get like a pushback, right? So you get it's the people that aren't not only promote it, but it's the people that are almost anti-stoic, which I don't really understand how you can be. I mean, you could simply not want to follow the philosophy. I totally respect that, but how can you be against the key tenets of Stoicism? But whatever, everybody has their own thing.
Yeah.
So what I've seen most consistently throughout my life, first was that it was a substitute for religion. It's not. The early Stoics believed in God, right? So therefore, they would have been considered a religious person at the time. I think was fair to say. I think that it's not so much part of the philosophy, because you could be a devout religious person, a devout Christian, for example, or you could be an atheist, right? And still
Yeah.
be a Stoic, if you will. It doesn't require a belief in anything. It doesn't exclude a belief in anything. And I had a friend who's done a lot of research on the early Christian church, and because he knows my interest in Stoicism, he always highlights how much Stoicism had an influence on early Christianity, for example, because it was basically most of the early Christians would have also considered themselves Stoics, right?
Yeah.
Especially when Rome adapted it as its state religion, if you will. So I think I've seen that, and I've had some people that are very religious be hesitant to really get into Stoicism because of that belief that it's like they're picking either or. And then when they realize that's not the case, that it fits comfortably together,
Yeah.
again, whether you're religious or non-religious,
Hmm.
um, I think that is it really opens the door for people to go down and look at the philosophy itself. It's not only what it stands for, its origins and its interwovenness, if that's a word, in
Yeah.
history, right? Like
Yeah.
you see so many things that actually come from this philosophy that when people get into it, uh, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is not some new age, you know, self-help stuff. This
Yeah.
is interwoven, especially in Western civilization, from the time democracy's birth, an integral part of democracy's birth, through the
Yeah.
development of all of Western civilization on most parts of society. It's not, I'm not overinflating it, but when I think people really start looking at the history, they're really fascinated about that. So that's one that you certainly can be religious or not religious and be very much a follower of the Stoic philosophy. The
Yeah.
other one, which is kind of interesting because I'm usually asked to speak about Stoicism in the military because of my
Yeah.
background. Um,
Yeah.
so oftentimes I lead with Stoicism has been an integral part of the military. It still is. It's booming in interest in the military.
Hmm.
When my son was at Ranger School, which is a very difficult military school, um, one place where uh, all they have is a library if you're waiting to get picked up on the next phase. He said there was every one of Ryan Holiday's books was there. Every one
Yeah.
of the old, classic pillars of Stoicism, discourses, all
Yeah.
meditations, of course, was all there and read. And so it's definitely a part of the military. But I bring it up because you don't have to be in the military to be interested in Stoicism. You could be
Right.
not interested in the military at all. It wasn't founded by a military person.
Right.
So I would highlight that. And then lastly, because I recently linked up uh, a friend of mine with a very well-known Stoic who's writes for the Wall Street Journal, um, of uh, Arab descent. And I think there's also a misperception that it's really for white dudes, right?
Right.
And because you look at all the
Yeah.
most of the people that were involved today and in the past, it is. But I do think that doesn't have to be the case. I don't think we should apologize because we're white dudes, but I do think we should promote the philosophy as all inclusive, which is the way it started, right? If you look at Zeno's Republic, probably the most
Yeah.
egalitarian and inclusive philosophy that potentially ever existed. I
Yeah.
think we should actively promote the philosophy to groups that aren't traditionally a part of it, right?
Yeah.
For the good of the philosophy and the people that could be involved. But I do think there's a perception, and maybe it's based on some facts, that it's a substitute for religion, all about military dudes and all about white dudes. And I don't think I think those are the three that I've heard the most and would like to kind of correct.
Yeah. I definitely hear at least some of those myself. So, but I mean, to talk about those a little bit. So your first one is that it's more like a religion. So do you find that people think that it's when they say religion, do you feel like they think that it's very dogmatic in the sense of like you can't discuss things, or is it more just that like it's a belief system that replaces a belief in a higher power or anything like that? What do you mean by people think that it's a religion?
I think because of it's so ancient in origins, because there's so many very important um, written pieces
Mm-hmm.
that it's quoted like the Bible. Whether it's
Oh, right.
Epictetus's publications or works or Marcus Aurelius, we tend to use quotes.
Yeah.
Right, I'm sure we will today. Right, we
Yeah.
tend to revere ancient figures.
Yeah.
Uh, that it looks similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not.
Yeah.
Um, it's similar in the sense that it was actually pre Christianity, for example, and pre Islam.
Yeah.
Um, but if the more people get into it, I think they realize, oh, I could be Muslim and follow Stoicism. I could be
Yeah.
Buddhist. There's a lot of similarities, I think, in Buddhism
Yeah.
and Stoicism, which is had a friend who did a whole documentary on that. The similarities between uh, Socrates, the godfather of Stoicism, if you will, and the
Yeah.
Buddhism, and then Confucian philosophies, right? That
Mm-hmm.
happened around the same time, and but not seemingly connected. But that we should do a whole podcast on. I'll see if
Sure.
she'd be willing to do it, but
Yeah.
with us. But that I think is a misperception. You certainly can be, and once people delve into it, they realize, oh, okay, yeah, I can be a Catholic. Catholics, by the way, and I might have mentioned my father was a Jesuit priest, so I
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
lot of Catholic friends, right? They seem to really, really not only um, are fascinated by it, but they really are educated by it. Like most Catholics I
Yeah.
know that were raised in Catholic schools, man, they can hold their own almost automatically with any Stoic on
Yeah.
Stoicism. So
Okay.
God bless them for literally for making sure the classics stay in education of children.
For sure. So then, if we talk about the military topic you were speaking to, do you find, and this was an interesting one because of one of the big pieces of writing from our practice is from Marcus Aurelius, right? Do you find that people misconceive Stoicism to be militaristic or like war, like maybe even jingoistic, or do you think it's more that like well, how does that come out to you? I guess is really a question I should ask instead of trying to direct it. So, do people think it's militaristic or that it's like pro war?
You hear a lot about. I mean, Aurelius was, in addition to being a Roman emperor, the general, right? The ultimate
Yeah,
general, the quintessential
yeah,
general, who
yeah,
always endured the hardships of his troops. Didn't stay, in the fancy tent getting fanned by, slaves or what have you. They was always on the front
yeah,
line fighting. Cato, which is the quintessential Stoic soldier, kind of the model, I think, for the character in the Gladiator. You hear about Patton and my former boss, Secretary and General Mattis.
yeah,
Um, it is definitely part of the military. I can say that unequivocally. It's not a misperception that the military, it which is an honor based society. It's
yes,
probably the most, next to maybe a monastery. The military is the most honor based society. Your value and worth is about uh, your courage,
yeah,
your ethics, your morality. It's not about things. It's not about having. In fact, it's you join the fraternity of the military, and you don't do it to become rich, right? I mean, that's just not
yeah,
not. You'd be kind of dumb if you're doing that because you're not going to be rich. But so I think it's there, but it's not exclusive, right? So
right,
there, if anything, the honor-based society should
yeah,
be society. It shouldn't be just one section of it. Like
right,
business, for example, you see a lot more when you go to these Stoic events. You see a lot of businessmen and women there who kind of did really well in whatever sector of business that they were in, and they want
yeah,
something more, right? They
Yeah.
want something more, and they want it to mean something, and they want. So I think it is true that the military is very pro. In almost every one of the resilient sections of, at least in the U.S. military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and now I assume
Yeah.
the Space Force. Uh, Uses stoicism as the actual foundation for its resilience programs.
Yes. Yes.
And it's not cloaked. It's there. I
Yeah.
mean, they literally. That's why, and I've spoken at the Naval Academy, and obviously I'm in the military, but it is definitely part of it. But I think it's important to point out, because some people are
Hmm.
like, well, I'm not in the military. I wasn't a, commando, so why would I be interested in this philosophy?
Right.
It's just as applicable to any other section of society that it is
Yeah.
the military. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, right? Like, it's so universal that it's so universal that it can be applied anywhere. But I've always found, and especially discussing some of the events that you took part in your career, that the military, what it does is it kind of boils down all of that junk, right? That you get, like social media and you know what I'm going to wear today and all that stuff, and it boils it down to sort of like a very base level of instinct, right? Of survival, for example. And when you boil all that extraneous stuff away, you know, um, the military needs sort of like a core set of tenets that you go by to kind of live your day to day, right? And Stoicism just seems to apply to that. At least that's how I interpret it. I mean, tell me if you disagree with me, but I think it's so acute in the military because, like, I've been the one in the podcast to use the examples of stoicism when you get like a crappy email from somebody, but it's not life or death, right? And you're not in bombs aren't going off, and there's no snipers on the roof, and there's no tanks rolling down, and you're trying to do that. So I think it's acutely present in the military at other times, but it's super universally applicable, I think. And that's at least the way that I take it. But the other thing I want to say is like, from a clear historical example, right? Marcus is interesting. Like, he's defending the empire. He does wage war on people. He initiates combat with the armies that are raiding the outskirts of the Roman Empire, right? Most specifically in what is today modern day. Oop, I touched my microphone there. In what is in modern day Austria. I was in
Mm-hmm.
Carnuntum with Donald Robertson, which was literally at the. It's built on the edge of the Danube, where it was the northeastern border at the time. And Marcus definitely initiated combat in those circumstances, but he was doing it because they were being warring and they were doing bad things. But the thing I want people to take away from that and from history is that Marcus writes to himself and then carries out this idea of, okay, I've beaten them now, so now we're going to make them an ally. We're going to make them a province. We're going to, like, Marcus would go with peace if he could, right? That's the interesting point about all of this. He's not out there saying, and as well, nobody, I think, wages war in the idea of stoicism. That's not a thing that happens. But in history, you have this prominent stoic who has the ability to do whatever he wants, but he chooses using his philosophy to initiate peace talks, to create, basically, I guess, vassal states, essentially, right on the edge of the empire, so that he wants alliances. He doesn't want wars. And it's like, okay, well, when you look at it that way, like, he's not Napoleon charging Russia, right? He's defending the empire and then saying, okay, we've settled this dispute now. We're signing a treaty. I'll pay you money. You pay me trade. We're all good. And I think it's important that people don't forget that historical context, because Marcus could always do what they did, what Roman emperors, they weren't emperors at the time, but Roman leaders did, like when they razed Carthage to the ground and salted the earth. Marcus didn't do that. He could have. He had all the power in the world that he didn't. And I think that's a really important takeaway there. So the last one you talked about, though, as well, was that you didn't want it to be considered as just old white men. And I usually bring up a book that was written by Donna Zuckerberg called Not Just Old White Men, or something like that, which is essentially about how, there's a lot of misogyny in the classical world. But you and I did a podcast series recently on the teaching of Busonius Rufus, and he kind of touches on this. And I think you were saying that, like, from the get-go, there are statements made. I mean, it's 2,000 years ago or more.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sometimes they say, as a man, you should do this. But in the same context, core teachers and prominent people in the philosophy said very clearly that women should be taught philosophy. They should be part of this. I mean, Socrates' wife was a prominent philosophy student herself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's your take on that in general as well? Like from in terms of the evidence from the philosophy itself that disagrees with the idea that it's misogynistic.
Yeah, and you have to take the writings at the time they were done, right?
Yeah,
At the time that Zeno responded to Plato's Republic, the stuff he was saying was revolutionary.
yeah,
Just the idea of equality between men and women, and between different groups, races, etc., ethnic groups, was really an advanced belief. And
mm-hmm.
then if you go fast forward to, like you say, Rufus, it was still a very advanced belief, and it's
Yeah,
always been part of Stoicism. So,
yeah,
um, again, I don't think we need to apologize for our gender or uh, racial category,
yeah,
but it the philosophy does not promote exclusivity to any group. It
no,
actually promotes the opposite. It's
yeah,
clear. I mean, you could just do any writings and you'd realize that. So again, I think it's important that we spend time as a group, people who are interested in this, actively trying to get other groups interested.
right,
It did uh, saturate Western civilization as it evolved, but that doesn't mean it's exclusive to Western civilization. It could be.
right,
It is absolutely just as applicable anywhere else. It's universal, virtues. It's a universal, logic system. It is applicable to anybody that's interested. So I hope that
yeah,
that is actually promoted at the Stoicoms we do. But
yeah,
eventually people get to choose who shows up. So it's about the idea. It's like America, like we used to like to say. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like, color of your skin, all that stuff. It's whether you believe in the ideals of the country here. And if you
yeah,
do, then you're American, right?
yeah,
There, it isn't like a lot
yeah,
of the old countries where you never really can be from the country if you're not, genetically from the country. There is no
yeah,
genetics in the United States that's
yeah,
required. I'm
yeah,
sitting here in Montana, and just about 35 miles that way is the Blackfoot Nation, right? They were here
right,
before the Irish, I can tell you that. So,
yeah,
and we're both American. So, but that's similar to what I think Stoicism is. It might be
right.
a core where it came from, but it's certainly not exclusive. And I think we should try to make it as broad and as diverse as we can.
Yeah, I mean, when we go back to thinking about the formation of Stoicism, even right. I mean, Zeno's I think we're not totally sure, but we think he's Phoenician, right? Which means he would have come
Phoenician, yeah,
from
it's from Cyprus.
right Cyprus,
Now
right?
the town's called Larnaca. Was just there last year, but
Right,
yeah,
that's right. Oh, yes, and you have that story of seeing his
yeah,
statue. So there's that, but then you have, what's really interesting to me in many ways is how many of the Stoic writers are actually expats, essentially, right? Like Epictetus's primed teachings are happening, and he's a Greek who was enslaved and taken to Rome, and so he's teaching in Italy. Like, so in many cases, like these are immigrants to the nations in which their philosophy becomes quite prominent, right? So, but at the same time, going to the core tenets of Stoicism, right? The one about the one tenet which is justice, right?
hmm
Which is usually the third one you say: wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Justice itself is benevolence and magnanimity for all. It's
yeah.
not for white
Good
people,
point.
right? Or just your
Right.
family. It is for all, and good treatment of all. And I think we lose some of ourselves, I think, when we forget those things because they're all human beings. That's all that matters. I don't know. I was always brought up with this idea of like I don't really see ethnicities and stuff like that. It's I see them, I embrace them, but at the same time they're all humans. Like, so someone from some country does something different than me, I cool. Like, I don't know, it's not really a bad thing. So it's interesting to have that come up.
Yeah.
So much though still today. Like, it felt like we made so much progress, right? Civil rights movements, women's suffrage, all this stuff in the last 150 years, right? But then sometimes it feels like we go backwards a little bit, and it's like, No. People were promoting like treating each other fairly well before well before 1968, right? Well before I can't remember when women's suffrage went universal in the United States, but it's or in Canada. I don't remember either. Actually, to think of it, but so these are not new concepts, and sometimes it seems like the cycle sometimes has us regress a bit.
That's why I
So
think Stoicism is such a strong counterpoint to what many people see as a surge toward autocratic rule,
yeah,
totalitarianism, and the rollback of civil liberties.
yeah.
But I would also say one thing that that I was thinking about it as we're talking. This idea that Stoics are fascinated with death, almost like
Oh
embrace it.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of like the. I don't think that's it at all. I think death for Stoics are two things. Two things that I can think of right off the top of my head. One, that it's going to happen, buddy.
Oh yeah,
Nobody's figured out nobody's figured out the trick
yeah,
to not meeting it. So as
yeah.
Aurelius says, all you can do is smile back. I don't think that means they
Hmm.
embrace it like they want to die. I think it's just they accept that it's going to happen. So just it's not if, it's when. So
Right.
you want to do everything you can, live every day like it's your last, like you're going to
Yeah,
die. Doesn't mean that they want to die. It means that you should treat it. You should treat every day like you want to make a difference.
yeah,
And that and then the second thing is that there's things that are even more important than your life, and that is really necessary many times to defend yourself, to defend your ideals. And I had
hmm,
this, I think most people can relate to at least the clip in the movie I'm going to reference. But we had um, early on, it was before the actual invasion of Iraq. There was a major battle, or to Saddam's Iraq, a major battle up in the northeast corner of the country between the Kurdish Peshmerga, which means "don't fear death." It literally is what the name means, and this huge, big, broad, if you can imagine, just huge mountains in front of us, major valley, and then it was all terrorists, right? It was thousands of terrorists that occupied this one section. They went there in mass once the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. Anyway, just to
hmm,
set the scene here, and it was a bunch of special operations folks that were with them, thousands of Kurds, and we were planning how we were going to go about this attack, right? And we were outnumbered, and we didn't have all the military stuff we needed. So, from the U.S. side, it was like, wow, this is going to be a challenge. Uh, the Kurds were like, challenge or not, we're going. We're like, we just wait a little longer, we get more stuff, it's going to be better. And they were truly the don't fear death guys. And we would play stuff on the projector on the wall where we were doing all the planning, and then in the interim we just leave it on movies, and then we'd turn it back on, and we'd put the sound would be off, and then
yeah,
we'd
yeah.
show
You'd be
like this is
working
how we're
away.
going to do, and big arrows, and all the
Yeah,
tactical stuff.
yeah.
uh, then Colonel Tovo ends up being General Tovo, was kind of our counterpart on the Army Special Forces side. And so anyway, we're taking a break, and then Braveheart's playing. Okay. And so we're kind of sitting there, and it comes to the scene, right? The scene when when everybody's about to turn and leave the battlefield, and he
Yeah,
gets on his horse and he says, like, if you turn and walk away, you would give anything to be right back here and have the chance to make a different decision, to
yeah,
fight for your freedom, right?
yeah,
So one of the SF guys just says, okay, this is really relevant, and turns it up. It turns
yeah,
it up
yeah,
pretty loud.
yeah.
And he starts giving the speech. And then one of the interpreters we were with, which we had a microphone to be able to talk to everybody, starts interpreting it as he says each part of the speech. And then you could
Hmm.
see the Kurds turn around and start getting interested, and they started standing up. The Americans started standing up. And then it was literally like people, when they're screaming at the end, the whole room was,
Yeah.
that's
It's a good
none of
scene.
those. Yeah. And this is real. I mean, right. And,
Yeah,
and, it stuck with me. It's not that these guys wanted to die, man.
right,
Nobody wanted to die. I sure didn't. I don't think anybody there was. But there
right.
is things that are more important than that, because everybody's going to get there eventually. So how you live is more important than how long you live. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I know it's a kind of a dramatic way to emphasize that, but it
Yeah.
obviously left a huge mark on me. And then when we
Yeah.
turned, we finally were on that day when we crossed this, major open area and all stuff. I could still see that in my head, that,
Right.
no matter what happens, we are fighting for a reason. And the Kurds were extraordinarily oppressed. Saddam had tried to exterminate them with chemical weapons in the place where we were sitting, to be frank, in the exact same town. So
Wow.
from their perspective, this was that scene in Braveheart, fighting
Okay.
against the totalitarian regime, fighting for their own people. And we were, maybe less emotionally attached to
Yeah.
but
But
because of
still.
them, it became
Yeah.
that sense of like, we're fighting for something big. So I know I'm bringing it to the military, but that's why it is so relevant to military applications.
Sure.
It isn't that Stoics want to die. It isn't that they think death is cool. It is that it is inevitable. And
Yeah.
it's, again, how you live your life, not how long you live your life, that matters.
I mean, I'll sum it up one of the best ways that I see it from a Stoic perspective, which actually is a quote from it's another movie. One of my favorite fictional characters to quote from for something like this is actually uh, Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek: The Next Generation. In the movie Star Trek Generations, at the end, someone says, someone told me that time was a predator. He says, but I think time goes with us on the journey, and it reminds us to make now the time to do the thing. Make now the time, for it will never come again. And that's what I think we take away from this. Like, carpe diem is a common phrase that you hear about Stoicism, and I think it's an apt one,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is like, there is no tomorrow. There's only right now, right? Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow may never come. So now is the time to do the thing. And I think that's a really important way to look at it. So now is the time to go for the run, to read the book, to start the painting you want to do, to take the class, to talk to the girl, talk to the boy, talk to whichever, right? Like, I think that's a very important thing. So, you never let it sit. And I think we take
Well
that
put.
into, I think we always take that into account. So, because that's the thing, Cato would have said upon the finishing of the Battle of at Utica, where he loses, he probably
Mm-hmm.
would have said to himself, look, I mean, I don't know how else I could have lived this, right? I literally stood up against what I thought was tyranny and oppression. And that. So, and we know that he doesn't really talk about regrets when they in the writing about the from his family at the time that he was getting ready to commit suicide for himself. And I think that's an apt one. No one here is suggesting we want to die, but it's the circumstance of I can choose how I live, and I think that's really important. Um, So one thing that I was going to bring up from my side of the line, because I get this a lot. I'm in the tech world. I work with the space
Mm-hmm.
program here in Canada, and I work in parallel with the United States space program with NASA and CSA. And you get a lot of stuff here where you see a lot of, I call them tech bros, like, they have a startup, and they like to do stuff a certain way or whatever. But what I think is really interesting is that people always think that Stoicism, because it's been quoted a lot by tech people in the past, that it's a very individualistic philosophy, meaning it's all about you, and it's all about making yourself better. And in some cases that gets misconstrued as like it's about making yourself better at the expense of others. Who cares about others? And I think that's something that bugs me a lot right now, because we are in a circumstance right now where people are hearing that. And I saw a study, I think it was last year or the year before, which said that the majority of people getting polled, and I think it was in North America, I think it might have been Canada and the US, the majority of people getting polled said that they didn't think that you could get anywhere in life by just doing good work and hard work and being ethical and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And that one really bugs me, because I'm seeing, like, in some of these circumstances, I can't really, I'm not going to really talk about them, but you have circumstances where people we know they're paying workers a tiny wage, and they have super yachts, or they've started a space company, or they've done whichever. And you kind of sit there and you go, like, is that really right? Now, don't get me wrong. I think you and I would both agree to one big thing, which is that Stoicism is a philosophy about personal betterment, about taking accountability for your own actions. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about character on the episode that came out just most recently at the time of us recording this. But ultimately, it isn't a me first philosophy, I think, is what I would say right off the bat. To be frank about something Marcus says, he loves to have quotes about the bees, because he always said what's good for the hive is good for the bee, right? Some people say it the other way around. They say what's good for the bee is good for the hive, but that's actually not the quote. The quote is what's good for the hive is good for the bee. So if you are doing something for the greater betterment of those around you and whatnot, that's the thing you're supposed to be doing. And I think that's a really important one, because you get a lot of people. I was at a party one time, and this guy, my friends were like, my friend brought her new boyfriend, and everyone was saying, you got to talk to this guy. He's talking about stuff we think you talk about. And I was like, okay. And he said, and we talked about it. And he was talking about like, the art of making a deal. He worked in like a fancy car dealership, and he was talking about the art of the deal, and he can really work somebody into getting, he can upsell everybody and make them da 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 da. And then he's like, oh, yeah, totally, bro. And everyone said we should talk to you. And he said something like, I read the meditations 5 times a year, and it's a core belief system for me. And then he goes back to talking about, like he just upsold this guy on buying 3 cars when he only needed 1 or something like that. And I'm going, did you read it? I don't think you read it, right? It may have looked like you were reading it, but I don't know that you really took away from it what we were all supposed to take away from it. And this is a tougher one. This is a tougher one because it's easy to like when Socrates would talk about it, or Seneca or Marcus, they would talk about it as you can be hard on yourself, right? The betterment of yourself is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think you and I would agree that that's a core part of the philosophy. But we better ourselves to then be able to better the lives of those around us.
And it happens simultaneously, right? If you have better people in society, you have a better society.
Yes.
Right? That value the right things. And obviously upselling a car to a person who wouldn't necessarily need it has nothing to do with Stoicism, right?
Absolutely.
It's sometimes it's equated to the conservative side of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Certainly can be conservative and Stoic, and I find a lot are. But you could be, liberal or whatever the term is now, progressive, and be Stoic. So it is universal, I think, on both sides.
Yeah.
Except for it is anti-totalitarianism. So that is a political aspect. If you are a person who supports autocracy and totalitarianism, you are not for us. So,
no, totally agree with that.
Keep walking.
Yeah, and if we kind of dive down a little bit deeper on that, like, okay, so I'm what I would call a social capitalist, and I know that's a term that is relatively new term, but that doesn't mean that I think people like one interesting thing is some people think you have to kind of sell all your belongings to do this, and it's like, well, no, I can't do that. I have too many hobbies, right? Yeah. But that's really not what it is. It's more the case. It's more the case of saying, like, I'm going to do good work. And if I were to be a business owner, I'm not a business owner myself, but if I was a business owner, right, it's like, I want the business to keep going. I want there to be a profit. But at the same time, if the only way to do that is at the expense of paying appropriate wages and providing good working conditions for those working for you, that's not really social, right? That's just capitalism in a high way. And I'm not against capitalism. And I think what's interesting is if we flip this to what you were saying about conservatives, I think a conservative can be a Stoic. It's just all a different perspective. If you're a Keynesian economic theory follower, you would say that the betterment of society is done through a sort of 50-50 mix of government stuff and private sector stuff. And that's more what a social capitalist is. We follow the idea of like working it together. But a conservative who wants a small C conservative, for example, in Canada, we would consider those people who prefer smaller government, smaller oversight, smaller control. They might just say, instead of having the government do all that, then the people should do that, and we should be, it should be, local groups helping each other and whatnot. I think that fits within the philosophy. It's just a different perspective. But no matter what, across the spectrum, it's not an independent, I will better myself and quash you down to get whatever I want, the gains, right? We don't do that. We don't really do that. And I think that's a really important one because we get this a lot. You get people like, I think I'd made this joke on other podcasts, right? It's like, I have a ice bath every morning before drinking my rendered, bison broth, right? And you're like, okay, cool. What have you done for
there is
somebody
an
else
aspect of like physical toughness. I agree.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Like Rufus, we did the rules of Rufus, right?
Yeah.
Rufus talked about that. Rufus also talked about minimalism. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
You don't have to be, actually Zeno started as a cynic, right? The cynics were the ones that went around. They didn't want to own anything. But I think he eventually realized that the only way to be a cynic is it's of other people aren't, because where are you going to get the stuff, right? It's almost like you couldn't have socialism, you didn't have capitalism, because somebody's got to pay for all the great ideas that, socialism thinks they have. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why he shifted from being a cynic, owning nothing but relying on everybody else, to a stoic, what eventually became a stoic, is because it's not really self-sustaining philosophy if you can't actually do for yourself. Like there's even a famous quote in Stoicism, it's like, do something every day that takes you one step away from the poorhouse, essentially. You got to be self-reliant, right?
You do.
And he does, in Stoicism, does promote minimalism. So if you're a Stoic and you've got, a 15-car garage, it's not really adding up.
No.
Right? I don't think Stoics would say you can't have a 15-car garage, but the ostentatiousness and the material, like the glorification of material goods, isn't Stoic. Just isn't. It never has been. So I don't think that Stoics would have a problem with somebody who's extraordinarily wealthy. I think because of the virtues, they would expect a lot of good works from that wealth. But they'd also, if you have, a house the size of Costco, you're not really in line. That is really promoting materialism well beyond what I think Stoics would find acceptable.
Yeah, and especially the way that you get there, right? Like if you're getting there, like I said, with quashing people's hopes and dreams for their own selves, then you're not even close, right? Mm-hmm. Marcus Aurelius gave up huge amounts of national wealth in order to raffle it off to make cash for the country because they needed money to be able to buy bread for the citizens.
That he did.
I think that's a very important point to keep in mind. So I think it's a good point for us to wrap up today. And that was very good. I really appreciated that conversation, Mick. I think this is a great time to talk about including our audience in our episodes, because the common misconceptions topic is an easy one for people to get into. So I think, it would be remiss if we didn't ask for people listening to, write into us. If you have questions, maybe we do a Q&A episode where we answer some people's questions and how we view it. We're not scholars. We're people, just people. But at the same time, it'd be interesting to know if people also have had these experiences with misconceptions, because it's not an easy thing to quell sometimes. You get for so many people think certain religions are asking for death to people, and you go, wait, no, that's not actually what it says. But I think everybody has to fight that battle when it comes to a practice or a philosophy or a religion. So, but any closing words for us today, Mick?
I think this was really good. I would like to see people, if they have the time, to write in what they want us to talk about, because this is a collective kind of experience here. And if they have an essay that they'd like to write about any of the topics of Stoicism, that could actually lead one of our episodes. And I've mentioned this in the past, I use essays essentially as a way of journaling.
Yeah, you've said that before. So, okay. Well, thanks, Mick. Great talk today. And for everybody listening, we will catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Sláinte. Thank you for listening to the Pup and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pupandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pupandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.